Denman was flooded in 1971 and since then has been fighting for a levy bank to protect flood-prone houses. The federal government has offered money for the past 2 years, but the state government has not been ready to spend it. Because the money wasn't spent, it was removed from the federal budget for this year. In all, the project should cost $1 million, with $400,000 from both state and federal coffers, with Muswellbrook Shire making up the difference. Now Minister Crozio must fight for the funds to be reallocated to the project. Meanwhile, tenders, which were to close in 8 days' time, will now be postponed for a month while a solution to the funding wrangle is found.
Police say a 60-year-old woman had parked her Ford Meteor outside BBC Hardware in Newcastle Road, Wallsend yesterday while she went shopping. When she returned to her vehicle, she noticed a young blonde man in his early 20s standing near her car. When she opened the door to get in, he forced her into the passenger seat and got into the car. He then drove out to the Minmi cemetery where he sexually assaulted the woman and stole $100 from her. She was left at the cemetery while he drove the car to the Stockland shopping centre where it was abandoned. Police describe the man as in his early 20s, about 182 centimetres tall, of thin build with fair collar-length hair and a fair complexion.
Last night's NBN Newcastle Herald Rugby League Awards capped off yet another successful season for the local teams in the Premiership. Major trophies were presented to top players in all grades. The National Panasonic Coach of the Year went to Peter Walsh, currently playing in England, from the Premier's camp, Lakes United. Rookie of the Year, the award presented to the most impressive up-and-coming league player, went to Ashley Gordon, who showed his style this year with the South Newcastle club. Equal third was Michael Schofield and Mark McQuillan, both from Cessnock. But the moment everyone was waiting for was Player of the Year, and the announcement broke the history books. For the first time ever, the award was shared by two players, captain coach of Cessnock David Woodbury and Lakes United player Michael Pittman. They both scored the top prize with an average of 7.5 points, tallied from points allocated after each game during the season. Both are long-standing players and will now set off on a trip for 4 to Hamilton Island, courtesy of 2HD and Jays.
The 2-week sit-in at Lenigan's Drive near Minmi has attracted much public attention, as has the presence there of a steam loco, which the railway men are still holding against the wishes of its owner, Coal and Allied. On Tuesday night, the men went before Newcastle City Council to hand them 5,000 signatures collected at the sit-in, calling for the reopening of the railway. Coal and Allied says the line is simply uneconomical and costs $1.1 million a year more to run than trucking the coal by road. The men claim that CNA has doctored the figures to overcost the line, for example charging themselves $65 a tonne for coal to feed the locos, which sells for $29 a tonne in Japan. Today, for the first time, Coal and Allied agreed to meet with representatives of the railwaymen in an effort to resolve the dispute. Delegates from the Metalworkers Union, the TWU, the Miners Federation and colliery staff from Stockrington No. 2 mine were also on hand for the meeting. While the railwaymen claim to have the support of the mining unions, Barry Joy of the TWU has come down strongly against the FEDFA members, claiming that their action could cost his members jobs hauling the Stockrington coal. He's also threatened to cut off deliveries to Newcastle City Council if it goes ahead in implementing its recommendation of a 10-tonne load limit being placed on Stockrington Road. After almost 2 hours, Coal and Allied representatives left the meeting to allow Peter Barrack to continue confidential discussions with the unions. Coal and Allied would offer no comment other than to say the company discussed discrepancies between their figures and those of the FEDFA members, and they were happy with the openness of the meeting.
our corporation, Warren Corporation, has recently amalgamated with a Sydney investment company known as Empire Properties, which is now going to enable us to do lots more things that we've always wanted to do.
There are rumours around town, and have been for some weeks, that Rod Muir is a principal of that company. Is that correct?
Yes, Rod is a principal. He's a director and a shareholder of Empire Properties. But it's mainly the confidence that Empire have shown in us that I think is the good news for us and for Newcastle.
Also, I have heard that you'll be taking over the Queen's Wharf building.
No, that hasn't been decided yet. We have been one of the tenderers, and we are still very hopeful and very confident that we may be selected as the operator. We also intend tendering on Lloyd's, which, and I believe the tenders close on Monday for that. I dare say we wouldn't have both operations, but we certainly hope we have one of them. And we've got other ideas for the city also for the future.
And outside of the city?
Yes, we intend to use our expertise that we've learned here and to take our concepts of Fannie's Tavern and our entertainment concepts to Sydney, to Surfers Paradise and a number of other areas in the state and the country in the next 18 months, 2 years.
The house at 36 Grandview Parade was being renovated. Firemen believe the fire started in the kitchen at 11 o'clock last night when a saucepan of heated oil caught alight. Brigades from New Lambton, Cardiff, Newcastle and Wallsend could do little to save the contents. Police say the blaze gutted 6 rooms, including the hallway and the bathroom. Heat, smoke and water damaged the remainder of the house.
The Fannie's development will incorporate the existing building, adjoining car park and the former Dunlop tyre outlet. The building will house an entertainment hall for 3,000 people, with a facility to divide into 2 separate rooms. In one corner, a restaurant, Smoky Joe's, will operate, modelled on the era of 50s rock and roll. The building will require extensive remodelling, but it's expected to be operating by Christmas. Rumours Tavern will become the Crazy Horse Saloon, modelled after other nightclubs of the same name overseas, although, in the words of a corporation spokesman, not quite as risque. Plans are still underway for the building of a concert hall, the idea of which was mooted nearly 2 years ago. A suitable site is still to be found. Mr Gruelling says that he's excited by the Newcastle plans, but will also be moving further afield.
We intend to use our expertise that we've learned here and to take our concepts of Fannie's Tavern and our entertainment concepts to Sydney, to Surfers Paradise and a number of other areas in the state and the country in the next 18 months, 2 years.
At this morning's judging, the competitors went through their preliminary rounds. Twice Mr Universe and father of Australian bodybuilding, Paul Graham, was the special guest. He is currently president of the Australian branch of the International Federation of Bodybuilding and says today's record entries is a result of the East Coast Championships long standing in the sport.
Everybody knows if they come to this event they'll get a fair judging, they'll be looked after and there'll be a good crowd and they'll have good competition to compete against. I think all those ingredients make it popular. It's promoted through our magazines and our lists through our members, and I think that people have just established it over the years.
What do you see as a highlight of tonight's finals?
I think the women's going to be, everyone's going to be very impressed with the women. I think there's almost 15 competitors in the women competing from all over Australia, and some of the girls look great. They look in tremendous shape. And I think the fact that there's about 70 competitors here today is going to be a highlight for everybody that sees it. It's going to be tremendous.
More than 400 people attended the pre-judging. Tonight's finals begin at 7. Tonight's inaugural David Maddison lecture is on ethics and the allocation of health resources. It's the centrepiece of a two-day conference on the subject. Organised by the medical faculty of the University of Newcastle, the David Maddison lecture will be given each year by a notary in the world of medicine. This year's speaker is Professor Stephen Leader, well known to the Newcastle community, but currently Professor of Community Medicine at the University of Sydney. Professor Leader says that ethics and medicine are intimately linked, and he says the country doctors' dispute highlights this point.
Well, I think it's a good example of the way in which there is a measure of unfairness in the provision of healthcare facilities at present. Here are country people who are not able to avail themselves of general practitioner services in hospitals in the same way or to the same degree that people in urban hospitals would be able to get medical care. So it points up the fact that I guess it matters a bit where you live. And if we went
A total of 33 contracted players went through this morning's 9.5 kilometre course, which, with its steep climbs, was more of a torture test than a road run. As for the very early start to training for next year's Sydney comp, McMahon says it's necessary if you're playing in the best rugby league competition in the world. He says today's run was to evaluate the players' current fitness and give them a chance to get to know each other.
It's just a get together, and it's a start for the night's preparation of the competition. It's just a training run, and we're just using it now for everybody to meet everybody, and for us also to ascertain what sort of level of fitness they're up to.
Well, it's only been a couple of weeks since the end of the season. Are they still relatively fit?
Some of them are quite good, yes, they are, and some of them need a little bit more work. But if we didn't have today's run, then we wouldn't have known that, so we have started.
Now, you've got the fair income training starting next week. What will that involve?
Well, we're breaking it up into groups. We've got our weight training group and our conditioning group, and also our sprint training group. As well as that, we're going to have particular training runs with the balls, doing defensive drills, offensive drills, and getting the different skills into each particular player to learn how to play the game.
The malignancy was found in the glands of the breast, but was described as non-invasive. That means it had not spread through any nearby tissue. The operation went without a hitch, with President Reagan spending 7 hours by his wife's bedside. The President, however, gave the all-clear when returning to the White House.
She is feeling just fine. Everything was like that.
In California, a baby boy less than a day old has been given a heart transplant. Baby Paul was born with a serious heart defect to Canadian parents. The donor was another baby born brain dead about the same time. Paul weighed 3 kilograms at birth, but received his new heart just 45 minutes later, after he was delivered by caesarean section. He's listed as critical but stable.
The State of Origin Solo Challenge was won by New South Wales from Victoria, in which a personal duel between Victorian world finalist Phil Crump and local Chris Watson saw 4 track records broken. Watson now holds the outright 3-lap and flying lap records. A bad fall in the limit race saw Foster rider David Hamnett and South Australia's Shane Parker taken to hospital.
Down to the checkered flag, he's fallen. Oh, down went Humphreys. Then was Edwards. Over the top went Parker with a heavy fall. So Edwards is over the line. Sensational ending to the race.
Veteran international soccer players took to the field today in the annual match against Dudley. Lining up for the Oldies Invitation 11 were former Scottish reps Sam Gordon and Willie Gallagher, English representative Peter Dewhurst and Socceroo Joe Zenkalski. Referee was Soccer Identity Bill Turner, while the oldest of the veterans was former Northern rep Bruce Lott, who turns 52 tomorrow. Officials announced the game a draw. Meanwhile, at the other end of the age scale, the Cardiff Little Athletics Club celebrated its 10th anniversary today with a carnival which attracted 200 juniors. Aged from 5 to 14, they came from as far away as Sydney and Orange to compete. State Treasurer and Wallsend MLA Ken Booth opened the carnival and presented the specially struck anniversary medals. Rachel breezed through today's final in just under 50 minutes. Her booming serve and crisp ground strokes were too good for Williams, a twice winner of the title. The capacity crowd saw a young lady who now has the tennis world at her feet. So far this year, Rachel has won the Queensland, South Australian and Adelaide Opens, as well as spearheading the Australian team to a win in the World Youth Cup. A familiar face in the crowd was Peter Doohan, the man who knocked Boris Becker out of this year's Wimbledon. He too was impressed by Rachel's play.
I think she's a very versatile player, very good for her age. She's got excellent ground strokes and can hit either the single or the double-handed backhand. Very good forehand, serves well, and at the same time she's not afraid to come to the net. So I'd call her a good all-round player, and she seems to have a very good attitude for the game too, and hopefully she'll continue to go the same way that she's done up until now, and she should go a long way in the game.
In the men's final, Brian Williams won his 6th Newcastle title when he beat Wayne Johnson 6-3, 6-2. 39-year-old Johnson, the resident pro at District Park, was sentimental favourite and gave away 13 years to his younger opponent. By the way, it was Williams' sister Anne who was beaten by Rachel McQuillan in the earlier women's final. It's the 11th year in a row one of the Williams had made the final, and the third time both Brian and Anne played finals in the same year.
Eight teachers in the Newcastle area are affected by the moves, those at this preschool, Wickham Kindergarten, and ones at Merriweather, Mayfield, Windale and Swansea. According to Independent Teachers Association organiser Wal Jurkovic, parents support this first ever industrial action by preschool teachers because of the new right approach of Kindergarten Union.
The main problem is that KU is seeking a new award for preschool teachers employed by them, which would make them quite distinct from the normal preschool teachers in the state. Now, this new award is seeking to, first of all, increase the number of hours worked by teachers from 37.5 per week to 40, to reduce holidays from 10 weeks per year to 6.5 weeks, and it also is seeking to drastically reduce sick leave provisions that exist in the current Preschools Award. Now, teachers employed by Kindergarten Union already suffer worse conditions than other preschool teachers in the state. The proposed changes would make them even worse, and it's a downgrading of conditions which both the members and the ITA regard as totally unacceptable.
Hunter Valley winemakers say last week's bad weather will have positive as well as negative effects on the local market.
It's very early to say at this point of time, but one of the long-term advantages could be if there is a drastic reduction in quantity available from Coonawarra. We directly compete in the premium end of the quality market with Coonawarra, so there may be some long-term benefits in that our wines will be more in demand and the price may come up considerably.
South Australia's Barossa Valley, Coonawarra and Pathway areas have been the hardest hit, with wineries there recording losses of between 20 and 80%, or an estimated 11,000 tonnes of their total crop. It is from these areas that many local wineries purchase grapes to either use in blending with other native Hunter Valley grapes or to bottle directly. In both cases, local vintners have successfully used these grapes to produce premium quality wines, some of which have achieved award-winning status. As a consequence of the unfavourable weather, the supply of South Australian grapes available to Hunter wineries will now be severely limited. This, however, is not the only concern for local winemakers. Basically, the Hunter will be disadvantaged in two ways.
It's still going to affect us in that it could affect the price of grapes. Of course, there are a lot of companies that buy grapes from Coonawarra area and make premium wines from other areas. If this fruit is not available, they may be looking to buy grapes from the other areas. And at present, there is a lot of competition for grapes in the Hunter, so it could also affect the price of grapes. Where it is going to probably hurt us in general is a lot of the wines are being exported at present. So it may mean that the export market is going to suffer if the people want to supply their normal customers in Australia.
The officer was speaking at the weekly lunch of the Newcastle Businessmen's Club, where he also emphasised the importance of improving the RAAF's image in this community. Air Commodore Robertson also took the opportunity to publicise the base's Open Day on Sunday the 8th of November and soon-to-be-launched efforts to raise $2 million to house Williamtown's Fighter Museum. But the RAAF's image came first.
We really only pay appropriate attention to defence issues in time of emergency. The rest of the time, the average person is content to accept what the government gives him. And I don't believe...
Talking about what the government gives him, retaining pilots is a problem, basically, we gather, because of what the government gives them.
Yes, it would be, well, that's one of the problems.
You described the situation as critical. What do you mean by that?
I believe that the problem cannot be allowed to worsen, and therefore it is critical. We have to take some action to get us out of this problem, whether it is through training our way out of it by simply increasing our pilot throughput and therefore effectively taking on the training task for Qantas and Cathay Pacific and others, or by paying our people more and therefore retaining them, or a combination.